Alrighty-o. It looks like it says I'm on live, and the ticker is counting. So it is October 25th of 2025 at 8:16 a.m. in the morning. And I'm going to try something different. However, I want to do... Now everything is just glowing for me. Clearly this light is too bright. I don't know what to say, people. It is what it is. We work with what we got, right? Okay. It just seems bright to me. Let me go see if I can turn that down a bit. Yeah. What are you doing? You're bouncing around. Yeah. You're just bouncing around. Bouncing. That's all you do. From the time you wake up all day. No, you're going to fall off the couch. Stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Stop it. Okay. It is what it is. This is the way we're going to do it. All right. Now I wanted to do a screen share on this. Okay? But honestly, I need Andre for it. Yeah. There's a video that I was watching. Let's see. Yeah, I'm talking to myself. That's the thing I don't like about these live streams, especially on YouTube, because you know how it rolls on YouTube for me. I think I'm always going to have that little bit of a bitter pill. Yeah, I think so. Now, I don't know if that's any better or what. That looks just as bad. Jesus. Now it's all dark. Well, mind you, it's dark for me, but still. Come on. Come on. Let's see if we turn on maybe a light over here. I don't know if that will make a difference. Not really. What about this one? I guess this is when they say, lighting is kind of important. Well, I suppose that's a little better. Alrighty-o. So, I just turned on this Windows 7 here. And I don't know. It got a little glitch in there. Sometimes my internet doesn't log on as fast as I would like it. So, when it logs on, that's when I'll, if I'm still working on this live stream, that's when I'll, what do you call it? Log on, and then, so I have a completely separate computer to hear, right? Because I want to do a screen share, but I don't even know. I don't know what the hell's going on here. There's the mic. It looks like it's on. So I never know what I'm doing when I'm doing this stuff. No. I never do know. Whatever. At least I try. How many times do you have to fall off the horse, right? Like, seriously, how many times do you have to fall off the horse? I guess it depends on how many times you get back up, right? A lot of people are falling off their horses right now with this, see, it's not even showing here. Okay. I'm trying to see where this live is. We'll go to my channel. It should be on my channel. Right? Yeah. Am I live? Not showing anything. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. What the heck is going on? Um, okay. Am I on live? I'm like 5 minutes and 24 minutes into this thing. Hello, hello, hello. Okay. But I can't seem to pull it up on my page. Oh, here we go. Okay, so let's click that on and see what we get. Probably looping, right? It's looping. I don't know. Oh, oh. I think so. Am I the only one watching? Me, myself, and I? Is that the one person watching? Jeez, bro. Oh my God. No, it's not going around. We'll get to this topic soon. Yeah. I don't know what the heck is going on here. Yeah. See, I don't know. Okay, so let's go to live stream. It says one is watching, but that's probably me watching my own page. Uh, share screen. Let's see. Federal subsidies, no more food stamps, 2025. People are. Okay, let's go there. Share. Because I want to talk about this, but oh, this is pathetic. This is pathetic. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Nope. Oh, doesn't look like anything is working now. So what happened to the camera? Oh, I'm on screen share, right? Aren't I? So how do you make that work? Oh my Lord. Okay, I guess we turn this on. I'm gonna turn on right now.
No, grocery store. Yeah. Okay, whatever y'all doing, stop. Now, listen to me. This is about to blow you guys' fucking minds. Excuse my French. But did y'all hear about President Trump's decision to end Section 8? Did y'all, hello, for the ones in the back?
That's too cool, man. Okay, clearly I still don't know what I'm doing. Ah! So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn off the mic, we're gonna mute it, and then I'm gonna put that video back on and see what happens. Okay, so I turned the mic back on. I'm hoping there was no looping when that video was playing. So what we're gonna do now, oh my God. Is it back to me? Okay. I don't know how I did that, but whatever. All right, so but I'm curious to know if that looped or not, because that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about right now. But I wanted you to hear that. So I need to bring it back just a little bit and hear for myself. I don't hear nothing. Oh, that just makes me mad. I don't hear a freaking thing. What a waste of bloody time. Okay, so this is online right now. Whatever. Okay. So, 3 watching. Well, I'm sorry, I'm not doing a very good job here, okay? Like, I clearly have to have my grandson involved because whatever's going on with the screen share, I don't know how to use it, okay? So, basically, what this video was supposed to be about was, well, I'm a Canadian. I don't know who's watching here, right? I really don't. So, okay, somebody's commented, just joined in. Uh, Karma C, okay, 3 folds. All right. Um, It's me, Tammy. Oh, Tammy. I think about you often, Tammy. I really do, like toe that line. Justice for our families, justice for our kids, justice for our communities. Well, I guess depends on where you live. If you're living in the New Congo, I wouldn't necessarily say justice for the New Congo, aka Canada, but maybe you still have a deep love for your country, that American flag. Where's that American flag? Oh, come on, baby, where are you? I think I don't see very well anymore. Tammy, I can't even see the flags. Where's the flags? Oh my God. I'll look for them. Okay. I want to talk about this is my other channel. Okay. Well, do me a comment on my last video that I uploaded with the lamb is done. Okay. And then I can click on your link to your channel and I can subscribe there, because I won't be able to do it from chat, right? You know what I'm saying? So, okay. So let me, now keep in mind, I get up really early in the morning and I sleep on a couch, and I work like a dog all damn day. So honestly I'm kind of like, because I've already been up for a few hours, and like Amari's been, well, he's quiet right now, right? He's quiet right now. So, but he's been bouncing around and giggling and laughing, and I'm like, shut up, be quiet, stop it. And he just doesn't want to listen. So, anyway, what I wanted to do was run that screen share with a video, which I'll just put into the link of this video, okay, after the fact, because I don't know how to adjust it so that you can hear it, I can hear it without all that looping stuff in there, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's working right now. It's just me talking, and I can say what I basically want to say based on my, well, I don't want to say 63 years of experience, but I've been alive for 63 years, and I've gone through some really crappy stuff, from a very early age, really. And I'm a little bit of a gangster, even though I don't look and act like a gangster. But with gangsterism being an OG, you tend to develop wisdom, right? Through your various experiences. And sometimes you have an experience when you're like in your teens, and then you right, you have another experience as you're coming into your 20s, and then another one, they're what do you call those things? It's like kind of like a milestone. It's sort of like a pillar, or maybe a light bulb moment, where you don't really realize what you're learning, right, until years go by. And Tammy would understand this, okay? Because when you start to connect the dots, this is what I'm trying to say, right? Something happened to you at 15, 17, 18, 14, 12, whatever. And then when you're 22, maybe 25, maybe 27, and then there was, a little lull. And then all of a sudden you got into your 30s, and you're 34, and you're 38, and now you're into your 45. And then when you're 53, like there's like light bulb moments within those years where by the time you get to my age, right, or in around my age, which is like creeping into your 60s, I would say. You're feeling it in your 50s for sure. You're aware, but you're too busy still. You got energy for the most of us, right? You know what I'm saying? We can still hold down the fort without any aches and pains. We can still wheel and deal, and budget our households and keep us afloat with the food in the fridge and yada yada. But as you go through, how they say you take 2 steps forward, and then you get pushed back anywhere from 5 to 20 steps backwards. It's never 2 steps. It's never 2 steps forwards, 2 step backwards. It's like 2 step forwards and more like 10 step backwards when people start pushing you back, because they want to keep you entrapped into a designated income bracket where you become a debtor, right? to sustain the status quo. Okay. And through that process, though, a lot of crappy things happen to you. Some of us more, some of us less. You know what I'm saying? And so where I'm at right now, with that all said, is I look at Canada, okay, and how our subsidized housing, because this is all about federal subsidized housing. What was the title? Okay. What was the title? I'm assuming you can hear me. Everything's nice and clear, right? Okay. Federal subsidized housing, offloading to states, human rights. All right. So for each thing that I mentioned there, which is 3 different so-called subcategories to the main category, right, are my past experiences that exposed me to each and every, I suppose, political spectrum within the politics of how people are manipulated to be basically locked into a financial bracket where it starts to define not only them as people, depending on where they're locked into, but also their future. In other words, most of us never break free and fully become successful. Okay. All right. So with the federal subsidized housing, I was being specific with the United States of America, simply because from my understanding now, I could be wrong. Obviously, I think I'm going to have to do a little research, as if I've got the energy, the eyesight, I got the inclination for it, but, but based on, from what I assume, this Section 8, okay, is a federal subsidized housing right along with the food stamps, EBT cards, SNAP, whatever, WIC, okay, where it seems that the payments come from the federal government versus from the states. But it's the states, I'm assuming, facilitate the payments through the transfer of when you have your fiscal budgets, and then it gets transferred from one government agency to another government agency. And so in other words, the federal government allots Idaho X amount of dollars for their SNAP benefits, and then so on. And, New York get there. And then from there, the states themselves divvy it up. Well, Canada kind of works like that too. But what I'm trying to say is, I don't know if the United States, with their independent states, have their own fiscal budget that comes from the taxes from the state in order to supplement welfare, as Canadians would know welfare to be. In other words, any subsidized housing programs that we have in Canada would relate directly to immigrants coming into Canada, and then they're offloading onto the provinces to fill the void to house them. And that was a big kerfuffle a few years back. It's caused a lot of problems, blah, 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 blah. We know all that. But at the same time, there are transfer payments. That's what they're called. Transfer payments from the federal government that gives it to the provincial government to house these immigrants that are coming in. But it isn't so much for, quote unquote, the residents of the country within the province that they live in. All right. That's the difference between us, I think, in terms of, what was that? In terms of a federal welfare state, okay, versus a provincial welfare state, okay? I'm not saying that the federal government of Canada doesn't, well, they do. I don't know what the transfer payments are when it comes to social safety nets. Daycare would be one of them, And that's assuming that the federal government wants to prop up a federal daycare subsidy program for all provinces, right? And normally that's usually on the back burner. It's not anything that anybody really wants to invest into, because it becomes like a sinking ship. Just because, I'm just saying. Or yeah, so normally governments, I know I'm stuttering. Okay, it is what it is. I just want to spit this out. Okay. All right. I just want to spit this out. Well, I'm not spitting, but you know what I'm saying. I don't want to lose my understanding of the way I'm formulating the crises that is developing in the United States of America. Okay, I feel like I just need to have this down a little bit and relax. And I'm a little chilled. I'd like to put on maybe a sweater or something, because my hands, I live in a house, right? Yeah. So anyway, okay. I'm watching these videos. We're up to 42 million people and counting. We're right where we're up to 42 million below the poverty line income families, people. Okay, we don't know how many families that is within that 42 million, but we'll just say 42 million people of all ages are being used as a political pawn to foster psychological warfare, right? Where the country is a whole is in division of the reasoning behind what is happening, which is going to put 42 million people's lives at risk to harm, injury, and death within a very short period of time. If you were to look at it as a full picture. Now, if you want to start taking pieces out of the puzzle, then you won't see the whole picture. Okay? Because what is the lesson that a president is trying to teach their constituency when it comes to 380 million people as servitude, servitude is like you're in a form of slavery, but you do it with an understanding where if you work hard enough and you be good enough and you or whatever, you'll get rewarded, right? And for whatever reason, there's a president, no names mentioned here, because it wouldn't matter what president it would be, because wherever these gears are in our society, where it can just lock out 42 million people, okay, from housing and food, and I suppose water, depending on your geographical area from where you live, and on the depending on the time of year, to prove a point. Okay? And if they're trying to reset the books in terms of where's the offloading going, okay, in terms of the states are already saying, well, we can't fill in the gap because you're not transferring the payments to us, right? Because there are no transfer payments no more. So it makes me think that the American welfare system is solely based on a federal level. Whereas in Canada, from my experience, now whether I'm right or wrong in terms of the legislation, I don't know, because I've never thought about this that far deep into the game when it comes to this kind of stuff outside of if like any welfare payments that I get from a government comes from the province, okay, where I am required to find basically my own housing, regardless of what the housing market is like. I am required to take that little bit of welfare money that I get from the province to buy my own groceries. I don't wait for a federal check. Where it seems like in the States, people are waiting for a federal check. And that's what's putting 42 million people at risk to having empty shelves and facing homelessness because they're losing their Section 8s, which is a double whammy. All right. So that's where the human rights come in. That's where the human rights come in, which makes me think of what happened in 2003. This is where my experience comes in. When my provincial government adopted American legislation through Bill Clinton's and Bush's welfare reform, which put, well, they only want to put it at 150,000 people at risk to dire poverty worse than what they were already in, because they just started cutting off everybody off of welfare that they could cut off, including mothers with 5 dependent children like me in the middle of winter. And I've said this before, they like to do this crap in the winter because not only is it cold, but it's harder to navigate to get to appointments and, meet this and meet that. And right. You know what I'm saying? And your immune system is down, right? You come into that gloom period where, just with no sun and blah, blah, blah. And yeah. So, this is like the devil's workshop is what I'm trying to say. This is nothing new under the sun when it comes to this crap. Okay. But considering everything that I went through when it came to discovering what my government did to me in 2003, when they just up and kicked me off of freaking welfare, whether it was a federal subsidy or whether it was a provincial subsidy. In this situation, it was provincial because Bill Clinton came over when he got elected. I don't remember. Well, I guess 2000, whatever. He got elected. Gordon Campbell got elected. As soon as Gordon Campbell got elected, Bill Clinton hopped on the ferry, came to Vancouver, I should say, shook the premier's hand, passed over President Bush's, and tweaked Bill Clinton's welfare reform, where they were cutting off kids from the time that they got aged out of a welfare home, we'll say, right? And they're like 19 years old and they aged out. They weren't allowed to get welfare for 2 years unless they could go out and prove that they were working for those 2 years before they could even qualify. So, and they were attacking women with children. Clearly, do you honestly think I was the only person to be illegally kicked off of welfare 9 months before the legislation even came into effect? And what was there was nothing that was applicable to me for them to do what they did. But it took Uncle John to be medically kidnapped for me to get into the guts of the paperwork within that legislation to find out, well, that was 2003 and I was writing Uncle John's lawsuit in 2016. So it took me 13 years to figure out how my government did what they did to me under an illegal act to put me in a position where I had a credit card and it was a do or die situation. So the game was on. That's how I started to support my family as I worked on a nonprofit, going further and further and further and further and further into debt. Yeah. As my government was refusing me to sign back on 4 years later, as I was looking after their foster child for no pay, because I had trust funds for my kids that were $2,000 or $3,000, and they wanted me to cash that shit in before they'd even look at giving me welfare again, even though I still had 4 dependent kids, because by that time, Brooks, my oldest, had aged out. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is, by the time 2016 came along, and I came into that legislation where it was a light bulb moment for me, I had to go through the experience, remember it, obviously, right? You know what I'm saying? And then discover 13 years later that it was an illegal act that basically put me in a direction where I became a servitude in debtor for the rest of my life because I'm 63. And if you want to know what my debt load is, I can tell you right now. Talk about being a gangster bitch here, okay? All right. And we can blame Bill Clinton for this and Gordon Campbell and I suppose Bush. Okay. Okay. So currently I'm at 78,000 $78,700 in debt. And I'm on welfare. You do the math on that one. If that ain't a gangster bitch, I don't know what is. Okay? I'm just saying. So nobody wants to hear this shit because they don't want to connect the dots because I can see it's back to zero, or maybe YouTube did something. Who knows? The point is you've got 42 million people being held over a sinkhole with the master, which is, I guess, the federal government, at the guidance of one guy, apparently, but we'll blame it on the Congress and the Senate, right? That's blaming, passing the buck, blaming somebody else, right? For putting their lives at risk. And nobody will be held to account because they're not going to want to challenge the human rights aspect around it unless they're up on their game. And currently, I don't hear anybody in the United States up on their game when it comes to fighting back on what's happening. Okay? All I hear on the internet, on YouTube, is people getting ready to do their smash and grab RIAs in the grocery stores. And if people think that once that starts, if it's going to just stop and start and stop in a grocery store, they got another thing coming. Okay? And people are already stealing even before this $42 million, 42 million people in one way or another are going to lose their federal benefits where the states can't forward those funds. So I'm wondering if that would happen here in British Columbia, Canada. If the federal government here in Canada supports our welfare programs in our independent provinces, they may supplement some of them, like maybe a childcare subsidy, right? But where the base of our social programs come from, whether it's subsidized housing, welfare benefits, right? Mommy and baby programs, yada, 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 is through the tax base of the province, where every year on a fiscal level, they budget in so much money to support the numbers that they already have on the books for the following years. And that's why when Bill Clinton came and shook Gordon Campbell's hand, and Gordon Campbell took American politics that basically dehumanized people's human rights and implemented those same policies, which are the same policies that they had in 2002, 2003, probably started in 2001, 2000 in the United States. It started there first because that's how it got here. And then it took our public union sector. I don't know exactly what year it was, but it took a social services, financial everything, child protection services, social assistance services, youth outreach, whatever service. It was all under one ministry. It was that ministry out of, I don't know how many ministries, we'll just say 17 ministries. It was that one particular public union sector that took the government to court through infringing on human rights, because what they had brought in through that, passing them whatever they did when Bill Clinton came by, shook Gordon Campbell's hand, it was illegal. But of course, by the time that all got settled in court, the damage was already done. And then it was, well, when I finally figured it out in 2016, what happened, and I wrote it into the lawsuit because it altered my family's life. It changed our direction. It put me into 23 years of a high debt load, right? You know what I'm saying? And it hasn't released me. I'm being held hostage to a housing market where it's going to put me basically into homelessness, or it's going to put me at risk to losing my grandkids in 3 years from now, because my next location will be smaller than what I got. And that will be enough reason for people to keep, I suppose, harassing me, saying I'm not doing it good enough, or or this or that, so that, that ministry can forward the funds to somewhere else, that, whatever, because, people are crooked. So what the Americans need to do, based on my experience, is get on the bandwagon real freaking quick and find those lawyers that, I suppose, in this situation, takes the federal government to court for human right infractions. Okay? And there's going to have to be, I would think, some public union sector workers in there fighting a good fight. Just like we had the public, it was a provincial, it wasn't federal, but it was the provincial, because our politics work a little different out here. But in the States, I think some of these federal workers are going to have to jump on board and really sock it to the government in a court of law. I don't know what courts or how, but where they challenge the legislation that even allows any government, it doesn't matter what it is, to sacrifice 42 million people on a gamble to balance the budget. Because that's why the BC Liberal government back in those days, under the leadership of Gordon Campbell, brought in illegal legislation and effed over 150,000 lives on the low books within. They had 150,000 people supposedly on welfare, and they wanted to drop the welfare rolls. So what? They were successful at dropping 150,000, and they just leveled it off at 100,000 so that they could say that they were helping the poorest of the poor, as they sacrificed 50,000, with my family being one of that families within that 50,000 write-off, throw them off the cliff, throw them down the sinkhole, put them out into the winter, you know what I'm saying, in the snow. Who cares if there's kids? Who cares if there's blind people? Who cares if they're old? It doesn't matter. Who cares if they're going hungry? The good old social workers will come in and risk, what is that called? Save the little teeny weeny babies. But once they become problematic teens, well, that might be a problem, right? And as for the old people, well, they're old, they're just a waste on the taxpayers' dollars. So who cares if you, right? I've been there, I've done that. And this is the mentality that the American people are living with. And instead of coming together and fighting for human rights, that people have a right to have housing, within reason, have access to housing within reason, have access to an income within reason. I mean, clearly, if you're going around and I'm not saying, okay, I'll use drug addicts for an example here. Okay. If a drug addict gets $2,000 a month from welfare, whether it's a federal subsidy from the United States of America, or whether it's from a provincial government like here in British Columbia, Canada, gives me, let's just say I'm a drug addict, okay? And in Canada, they give me the $2,000 a month to live. And basically, I'm just running around acting like a drug addict. Right? Does that make sense to give a drug addict $2,000 a month? No, not if that's all they're doing, okay? But at some point, they're going to need their little check, I guess, for support, where if they need to buy medicine, cough syrup, if a woman, tampons, just toothbrushes, a little bit of food, bus fare, then yeah, they should get their base core support. Okay, right? Now, if they're homeless, should they get their shelter? Well, obviously not. But the problem with that, though, is as soon as a person becomes homeless in Canada, in my province, they lose their support check. So if they get 800, their rent check, if they get, we'll say, if they get $700 for support, because it used to be $320 a month for support. And then there was an increase. So we'll just say they get $550 a month in support for their food, their bus fare. And, some of them, they maybe get bus tickets, but for their just basic support, but they're homeless. They don't get the $575 or whatever it is as a single person, or maybe it used to be $350. Maybe it's still $350 for all I know. Oh, it could be $450. A single person on welfare probably gets about $450 for rent. So if they are homeless, they don't get it. All they get is their support. That's not coming from the federal government out here, but that buys them groceries. That's what that ministry was fighting for when they took the provincial government to court for the legislation that was illegal under human rights. Just human rights. That's how they won. They challenged the human right aspect around putting people out onto the streets with no safety nets. That's what the American people have to do. There's somebody in there that needs to do that. And the public union sectors, to one degree or another, that it impacts the most in terms of the workforce, because the government can't do what it does without the workforce. Right? They couldn't cut me off of welfare in the middle of winter with 5 dependent kids and a blind man with nothing, no welfare check, just blink within 30 days. That was my warning, 30 days, okay? And my youngest was 3, under 3. When I say 5 dependent, they were all dependent on me. Uncle John, being blind, bad legs, was dependent on me. And they threw us out into the snow on January 1st of 2003. Okay. 2016, I realized what they did. I found the legislation. I found out how they did it. Yada, yada, yada. 2017, I was writing Uncle John's lawsuit, but by the time Shimei died, and I took my province to court, and I brought it to their attention, what they did to my family in 2003. So nobody can be surprised that I've got 2 dead daughters today. And with Uncle John missing in action, now hear this one, if you've been following my family story. All right, Shimei, for all we know, this could be the Duncan clan. Debbie Duncan sitting on a, stolen inheritance that she stole from her adopted father at the hands of a corrupt sister that locked them away like a dirty secret and then cut off the IV line just because she could to get rid of the problem. Yeah, okay. So anyway, Uncle John and we opened up a trust fund for Shimei when Shimei was born. And we paid into it, blah, 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 for educational purposes later on in life, right? I think I borrowed money on it. I'm pretty sure I did. I had to borrow money on it because my government illegally cut me off of welfare in 2003. They denied me a second application 4 years later, even though I was babysitting their foster child for free. And so I had to cash in a little bit of that. I had to borrow on that educational plan. Right? So it brought it down to a bare bones kind of thing. Anyway, Uncle John got medically kidnapped, right? The money was coming out of his account, whatever. So I put a hold on it, but it requires 2 signatures. to release it. Uncle John has been medically kidnapped since 2015. He died in January of 2018. We are now in October of 2025. I phoned up that company yesterday. I said, I have been mourning for my lost daughters for a while now. And I've been mourning Uncle John's death because that's basically, it was a slow one. Okay. It was a slow take him out. Anyway, so it took me how many years to phone them? We'll go from 15 to 25, 10 years. But he died in 2018. So 8 years, 10 to 8 years to finally phone them up because I'm like, okay, I want to deal with it. I don't want to go to court and try and get a judge to do this, that, and everything. My daughter's dead. I can supply a death certificate. This is the politics, how governments mess with you, right? And, John's been dead since 2018 of January. He disappeared in 2015. I had to put everything on lockdown because, his sister and the bank were accusing me of this and that and everything. So I said, the hell, don't take no money out, just whatever. But, it's time to, tidy up the books kind of thing. I need to deal with it. I want to close it. Well, we can't. I said, well, what do you mean you can't? I know. That's why I haven't called you. Well, because it requires John's signature. I said, yeah, well, I can't provide that. He's dead. Oh, well, you got to give us a death certificate. I said, I can't do that. He was medically kidnapped at the hands of Fraser Health Authority and CIBC Bank with a public union sector that clearly was only thinking about herself in terms of she used her position of authority, Eleanor Gilding, right? Working for the province, as a manager to the provincial immunization program. Wow, isn't that interesting? Yeah, and because of that, she paid off her little bribes, and she was successful at medically kidnapping her brother and stealing his money, and then made sure he died when she didn't need him no more. Yeah. And with that, I still need his signature after all these years. And everybody's on lockdown, and we don't know what to do, including the trust company that's holding Shimei's trust fund. And it's only a cash out of $1,300 because any grants, federal quote unquote grants that the government put in when I first opened it with Uncle John, when Shimei was a teeny weeny little baby, some of them were federal, these RSPs. Oh, open your child up an RSP, right? Okay, you want to talk about experience here? I'll tell you what your RSP is going to get you. Okay, open up your little RSP thinking you're doing a great grand thing. The federal government supports it, the provincial, the state government. Oh yeah, you open it up and we'll match you and we'll add in this and then, okay, so that's how many years Shimei was born in 95. So what, Shimei would be what now? 95, 30 years old, something like that. She'd be 30 years old. So for 30 years, that thing's been in existence with federal deposits in there that got put on lockdown because of corrupt union workers that were taking either bribes, kickbacks, or just direct, straight out stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars in insurance money as they were committing fraud while they did it. Okay, right? So, I've been mourning. I just mourn in a different kind of way. So finally I broke down and I phoned. I said, okay, we need to deal with this because if I have to go to court in front of a judge just to sign off John because the judge said so, write him off like another dirty secret, then I guess I'll have to do that because I can't have just $1,300 sitting there doing nothing. And the federal government can have back their money for as much as they've done for my family in terms of keeping the criminals out of my country. How about that one? Because that's what governments are supposed to do. Keep the criminals out of the country. And for the criminals that are in the country, I don't care if you murder somebody by hot-shotting them or if you medically kidnap them and steal $500,000, $1 million in life insurance policies that you didn't tell the person that you were stealing from that they had, just so that you could steal it, as you're accusing other people of stealing. Where's Uncle John after all these years? Because I need his signature to let go of my dead daughter, Shemay Chorney, and to give back the federal freaking whatever back to them. For what it's worth, it got to get me nowhere. No. Because the provincial government can change as fast as the federal government. The rules change with the legislation, right? And then you're right back to square one. You get ahead. You got $3,000 set aside for your kid to go to college because you signed up with this little RSP with the government putting in a little extra just to give you that. You go, girl, go, dad, you're doing a good job. Don't worry, it's set for life. And then this is when you do when they're babies, right? And then by the time they're 7 years old, shit hits the fan. New president, new premier, new governor, new mayor. Who knows what's new freaking corporal on the block. They're changing all the rules. Next thing you know, you become the criminal because you got $2 extra in your freaking pocket, right? And they want you to cash that in before you ask for any help. So whatever you did for the last 7 years for your kid, you end up living off of. And God forbid if you got 2 signatures on there and one dies, you might as well kiss that money goodbye. So now they're calling in the big dogs. They got the supervisors getting involved how to deal with this problem. I told him, you want to find out John's, just Google his obituary. They made him an obituary online, right? So, that's just, and that's not including CIBC Bank, the one that helped to facilitate the medical kidnapping of Uncle John and steal his fucking money so they get their dividends in one lump sum. Dealing with a quote-unquote professional, because Judy was just an enduring a power of attorney for 25 years, enduring power of attorney. I had 2 powers of attorney, and the bank acted like it didn't exist, and they tried to hide it from me, right? This is what I'm saying. So, and Andre's little trust account sitting up at that bank requires John's signature. It's interesting. I just phoned them and I wanted to see what other account was connected to my account, but it didn't come in. So I actually got to phone them because I know I could see them trying to wash it under the rug. Now I know I deposited $5 to keep that thing alive because that's another account that requires a dead man's signature that just up and disappeared as everybody was accusing me of stealing his money. But yet I was the one left holding the freaking bag in the house that he lived in and helped to build for over 23 years. And he just mysteriously, blind man, walking on a cane, 77 years old, just walked out the door. Yeah, okay. So you got a lot of criminals going on around here because when you're cutting off 42 million people, just cutting them off like that, I don't care if it's one person gets murdered and the income drops. I don't care if it's one person that gets kidnapped and the income drops. I don't care if you get kicked out into the streets in the middle of fucking winter, disconnected from your methadone, disconnected from your child, from your family support system, from whatever it is in terms of a single woman like Sierra, just so that you can prove a point that you can kick them out in the middle of winter time. And then act surprised that they turned into a full-fledged junkie from the time that you kicked them out within a 10-day period, and then proceed to say, well, there's something wrong with you because clearly you're an addict. Really now, well, I guess we had a right to kick you out, even though we don't want to admit why we kicked you out. And that was for not coming home. It wasn't because you were doing drugs. It was because you were not coming home. But we'll never tell that part of the story, especially when it gets to court, because the government doesn't want to be held to account. And this is why the American people, facing what they're facing now, based on my experiences, need to grow some freaking, what is that called? Hair on the chest, some gills, you know what I'm saying? Some BALLS, let them hang low, sway to and fro, right? Put on your freaking Viking hats, do something and fight back. This is not about morality. I'm not saying everybody has a right to have a no, that's not what I'm trying to say. I don't think everybody has a right to a universal income, because again, it goes back to my experiences within my country back in the day when family allowance, we used to call it family allowance, which was a federal universal program that every Canadian qualified for as a parent, whether rich or poor. So if you were a millionaire in British Columbia in when did I go to Vancouver? Sierra was born in 97. So, okay. So, no, I have to think about this when she was 2. So 88, 89. So in 1989, 87, in around that period time, every parent or household with children would receive a universal family allowance benefit from the federal government once a year in a lump sum based on 12 months of that parent raising their child. That's how I moved from Victoria to Vancouver. I waited till November to get my tax family allowance tax federal family allowance tax rebate, and that's how I moved my family from an island onto the mainland. That's how I moved my 2 kids from Vancouver to Alberta. I budget around that, and I use that money to ship my container, travel, whatever, get paid off, damage deposit at new location, have a place before I even got there, right? Everybody had access to that. Didn't matter, rich or poor. That's why it was universal. So if your income was $650,000 and you had 2 kids, whatever the maximum was for the 2 kids under that program, that was a universal federal program, that was a family allowance tax credit benefit type thing where you'd get once a year, blah, they got the same amount that I got. Everything was equal on a playing field. So when it comes to a universal income, I'm not in agreement with that, because the rich at $650,000, I mean, there's a fine line in there, right? If you want to be gluttonous and always want more, then obviously you're never going to be satisfied, right? And you will become soulless, and you will do whatever you can to just keep building wealth, because that's your personal addiction, right? If you budget and you live humbly and blah blah blah, and what is that called? Be financially literate and da 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 da. Then you would honestly say, well, if I qualify for that family allowance, great. If I don't, we're okay. But we're beyond that now, right? There is no, because what happened was, after a while, I guess people were complaining, or the federal government just wanted to cut back or whatever. And then they changed it where it's all income based now. There's that threshold. Once you meet $36,000 a year in a house, whatever child tax benefits are coming in from a federal level is starting to be chipped away at. The higher the income, the less, right? And that's pretty much, that's all across Canada now. And that came in, I don't know what year that was. It was after, I don't know. It was in the early 90s, I would say. Early 90s. They started breaking up that subsidy or child tax benefit, which was formerly known as a family allowance once a year deposit, into 12 equal months to offset the cost of living. Yeah. As a means to keep the herd fed, keep the herd fed without it riding, right? As long as you had enough just to, so they had to, they didn't want to increase the welfare payments on a provincial level to supplement the cost of living, wherever that cost of living was growing. What they did is they broke up that one lump sum into 12 equal payments, so that if you used that family allowance to go off and buy groceries, because your welfare check didn't give you enough for groceries, you'd go to the welfare office, ask for groceries because you still wasn't enough. They'll be like, well, no, you got enough. That's what the family allowance is for. And then of course it dips into the rent. That's why federal governments like to bring in large families in terms of refugees, where there's maybe one or two parents, usually two, with 5 to 7 kids. Hook them up into all these federal programs in partnership with the municipal ones, and then plug them into these housing units, especially in British Columbia, Canada, well, all across Canada, really, where it's if these immigrants didn't have these subsidies based on their income, which would be below the poverty line, they'd be homeless, right? But over time, things change. Kids grow up, right? So when it comes to a universal income, I think that's wrong. I couldn't imagine owning $10 million worth of property. I'm just saying, a couple, 2, 3 houses, making money as a landlord to some of those. I'm just using them, especially since that's the big money maker right now, whether it's a corporation, a property developer, or just a private landlord. I mean, they're the ones that are benefiting the most out of this economy when it comes to, not only are they penny pinching and gimme, but they're maximizing on the most amount of profit, right? After it's all said and done. Well, families are just falling apart. So why should they get a universal income based on what our governments are trying to do through their mapping the herd? Because once you're signed on, you're logged in and you're being mapped. And then you're being manipulated. And if they don't want you to succeed, trust me, you won't succeed. And if they want to push you back 20 steps, it just takes one welfare worker in an office behind a phone that you'll never meet to say, sorry, Miss Chorney, but you're going to get cut off of welfare with your 5 little kids and Uncle John in the middle of winter because legislation says so. Well, where's the legislation? Well, it doesn't matter. You look it up. But in the meantime, don't expect a welfare check. Okay, click, John. Well, what does that mean? Like, I can't, if I give my landlord all my rent, there won't be no money for food. But I got a credit card, so don't worry about the food. I've got that covered, and anything else to get us to the next destination in terms of paying for, trucks and damage deposits and fucking all that stupid shit. I moved twice, right? In a 3-month period, all on credit. And, so you can't be surprised, like where my credit's sitting at to this day, because as soon as they took John, everything went whoosh, everything right back to square one. Well, this is what's going to happen to people that have credit now. They're going to rely on their credit more. And that's assuming that they even have credit. And whatever is going on in the States is a human rights issue, okay? Because we're not cutting off those that got a whole lot of money in terms of those that are at $650,000. If you are financially illiterate and you want to be an over, keep up with the Joneses, keep up with the Gills, keep up with the Sidus, keep up with the freaking whatever ethnic Jones there is out there in terms of, once you get to a certain income level, like the Chans, if you want to keep up with the Chans, well, and it all comes crashing down at you and your income's at $650,000, don't expect the government to bail you out. But if you're on the lowest of the low, in that servitude entrapment, whether you've got a good mentality or not, in terms of so many times I tried to work myself off of welfare and I was either denied, had it taken away from me, or literally just kicked off, and then had a million hurdles put in front of me. And, just with the crap that I've been going through with my grandkids since I got them, as if it was my fault that my daughters got murdered, and nobody cared about that and doesn't care to seek justice around that, and nip heinous crimes within our community, more than one, more communities as a whole, because if one gets away with it, two will do it. If two will do it, then four will do it. If four will do it, then it will be 8, because nobody goes to jail. So what's stopping them, right? And so it's a human rights issue. It really is. And I feel like YouTube is, a lot of these videos are showing Black people as the agitators. Now, sure, there's a few white people in there, but it seems to be very lopsided when it comes to that subliminal messaging. That's another thing I'm noticing, right? When realistically, on the books, there are more white people on assistance in the United States than there are Black people, because there's only last time I checked, but that was quite a few years ago, there's only like 40 million American Black people in the United States, compared to 200 million white people. I don't know what the ratio is, not including the Spanish, because some Spanish like to try and pass themselves off as white, depending on what state they live in. Now now you're getting back, now you're getting into some real old school politics there from 1999. That's Black Planet. There you go. Black Voices. You remember those days? Yeah. Alex Jones, Prison Planet. So, and nobody fighting them. They're just geeking it up. They're geeking it up, trying to divide the country in terms, not the country, but the people, right? Those that have against those that don't, right? And as you've got people, keyboard warriors, posturing on the internet, acting like gangster this and gangster that, as they react to the situation at hand that could very well happen, because we're getting close. I think the cutoff day is by the 27th, in terms of after the 27th, there's no going back. So I'm just going to put it at 42 million individuals are going to be left with no food or access to supplement the food that they have already, assuming that they have it. There's no way to replenish it, right? As who knows how many. And to be fair, there's an attack on illegal immigrants where, from my understanding, Trump is trying to use the illegal immigrants, I suppose, as an scapegoat to justify cleaning house when it comes to what? You kick them out of Section 8 housing, even though 2 years ago it was all over the internet how they were getting housing because of the immigrant accord, and just, you have to get back into those accords again, right? Nobody talking about those accords that's fueling this, okay? So how can you give somebody something and then 2 or 3 years later take it away and criminalize them. How can you ask me to get a little trust fund for my beautiful baby named Shimei, sign it up with Uncle John and whatever, and we belong, because he was there when she was born. As soon as she came out of my vagina, she was given straight to him. So this was something that made him proud. He wanted to do it. I said, okay, fine, because I already had for my other kids. And so that's the way we set it up. And then it was used against me. I was denied welfare, even though I had been cut off of welfare illegally. When I went back 4 years later, saying I'm struggling, I got an extra kid that I'm feeding all the time, even though I'm not getting paid by MCFD, even though I'm doing foster care. But besides that point, I'd like to try and sign up, but you can't, because you have this trust fund, and this trust fund. You need to cash them in. And but they're only 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, whatever. It's the fact that they accumulated between, 3 or 4 of them or whatever, because I had 5 kids, right? So then I had to start dipping into them, bore on them to live on them, as I was racking up my credit card, thinking that I lived in a fair country where if I worked hard enough, promoted the nonprofit for all the right reasons, yada yada yada, even tried to do outreach and none of it worked though. No, all it did was just make me be a slave to that servitude debt, and it held against me when it's convenient, whether for the corporation, CIBC Bank. Oh, you're just a poor little welfare mom. You don't know how to fight back. That's okay. We got a professional gangster in here, bigger and badder than you, that works for the government, and we're going to side with her because she's the one holding Joan Duncan's will and the policy that is supposed to be paid into John, with John's, being aware of it. She had 14 months, and she didn't tell him. She had to wait until she could get him in a hospital situation, get me locked out by accusing me of something, and then telling all those workers, being that she's such a professional nurse, to start drugging him up, keep him drugged up, and just make him think that he's taking a calcium pill, so that they could commit fraud in the back room and then illegally transfer him from one care center health environment into a hospital, and then try and save his life because he almost died, and then keep him drugged up so he couldn't fight back. Not that a blind man that can't walk could fight back. And then threaten to call the freaking security and the cops on my kids when they went to go see him, as the sister isn't up in John's face. Well, you can't see the kids. Spitting in his face, knowing you can't see the kids. You're not well enough. Take it to legislation. Read in the legislation. I can point it out. I've got it written in my lawsuit, something that the government ignored. They are not allowed to do that. They can't come in there, drug you up, keep you locked up, and then put their faces right into your freaking face and tell you that you're not allowed to see your family who you love until you're better. But that's what thieves do. They commit crimes and they don't follow the law. And that was a public union sector worker who's still employed to this day. So do you think a president is any different when it comes to committing a crime that's against human rights? Or a premier of a province that takes in legislation knowing that, first of all, it doesn't even apply to Canadians, but they're going to take it anyway and use our province as a test to see what would happen? And it took another government union sector to take the province to court in order to rescind illegal legislation and put it to rest and never act on it again. Well, we now got so-and-so over there not just doing it in one state, but he's doing it in every state, as he's blaming the immigrants for it by saying, well, we got to cut everybody off of Section 8 because we got to flush out those illegal immigrants. How does he plan on housing all these homeless children that are going to start showing up on the streets? He's already got that problem out there with little 2-year-olds out in the streets with their parents. And apparently he won a Nobel Peace Prize for what? For what? slaughter of the lambs, in terms of children are like little lambs, you're going to throw out more out onto the street? You're going to make it so that their parents have to struggle with food and have that cortisol going on in their brain like crazy. You know what I'm saying? And thinking about doing things that they wouldn't normally do out of desperation. That's psychological warfare, right? So it's going to take a very large group of people. Some of them professional, and some of them like Tammy and me. We just toe that line. Okay? You got to come and start towing that line. Right? Everything else will iron itself out after the fact in terms of, again, if you're making $650,000 a year in a household, do you honestly need a universal income like the good old days back in the 1980s? 87, 86, 85? Or do you think it should be like a sliding effect like we have now in terms of that federal tax child benefit when it comes to, the income, right? We're already on there. It's just our governments are trying to widen the net when it comes to controlling the herd and bringing us down to you will own nothing and you will be happy, except for those that are the instrument for the devil's workshop by pushing millions and millions and millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions and into perpetual servitude slavery. I have yet to see anybody stand up and fight the good fight on the internet yet. And if all you're fighting is the federal government because your states are helpless, from my perspective, looking at the way how things happen out in my neck of the woods, and with so many federal workers losing their jobs or being laid off, what about these workers that are being like, I don't know what the word furlough means, but they're temporarily not working. Do they get to come back and go back to work after this, whatever's going on with the Senate and the Congress comes back to, like, do they get to go back to the work, or have they lost their jobs? Right? Because now if they've lost their jobs, it's just a matter of time before they're going to want to put in SNAP, like a request for SNAP benefits. Right? Some of them might have too much pride, but they're all going to have to liquidate their assets. But that's the game. That's what those trust funds show you. That's why I talk about them. It doesn't matter if it's a little teeny weeny trust fund for $3,000 that you were forced to cash in or borrow on just so that you could get your family to the next location, or buy some groceries or whatever, and then it gets put on lockdown for I don't know how many years. Uncle John's been gone since 2015, 10 years. And they still want Uncle John's signature, and he's dead, and he's been dead since January of 2018. Well, his sister is spending his money as the government protects her so she can teach somebody else how to do it. Well, everybody ignores those criminals. Whether it's the politician that's bringing in that kind of legislation to allow that crap to happen, or whether it's the workers themselves that make it happen. And then the court covers it up. Right? But if you get professionals in there fighting the good fight, like they did when they brought in that, that legislation from Bill Clinton to Campbell, and then eventually the Ministry of, I don't remember what it was called, but basically the welfare department, they took the provincial government to court under human rights, and they won. And they shut that legislation down. And it wasn't federal, it was provincial. What's going on right now seems to be all federal. So it's a long fight for sure. It's not going to stop people from stealing because they're going to steal anyway, even when they get support. Smash and grab Rhea. She gets a lot of support with her disabled kids in terms of cash. Okay? I mean, enough so that she can fly to Mexico, she can freaking fly to Jamaica, and she can go to fucking California, and that's a welfare mom. All right? And she's still smashing and grabbing when the opportunity hits. I could only imagine what it would be like if she didn't get a welfare check. Okay? Whether it was for Section 8 or whether it was for food stamps, right? Because we don't get food stamps out here. We don't get Section 8 out here. We get what our province gives us under a welfare check. And then it's up to us to try and figure out how we're going to house and feed and for our families on low income. Some of us are more bolder and braver than others, like me, wheeling and dealing all these years with credit cards and just I'm that gangster bitch with the credit card. Got to be $78,000 in debt. Like, I'm like, give your head a shake, right? And some of us have no credit cards, or if we do, it's maybe $2,000, $3,000. Doesn't give you much to work with. You know what I'm saying? And yeah. But at the end of the day, ain't no federal government cutting off the welfare check. It would have to come from the province. And this is where the provinces, this is where the states are being held hostage. Okay? In terms of they're not getting their transfer payments. So when I think of that, I think that whatever's been going on with those programs all these years, from a federal perspective, I mean, it is still transfer payments being transferred over to the individual states. But I don't think the province out here, I'd have to check into that. I don't think the province out here gets a federal transfer payment for food to add on to your welfare check. That comes from taxes. That's why Republicans, BC Liberal government, I think they're called the Unity Party now. They dropped the BC Liberal. I think they call themselves the Unity Party now. That's where they get their taxes from in terms of balancing a budget in order to be able to keep giving people welfare checks. Right? And I know the Republicans have been like, I'm just thinking out loud here, right? I know that the Republicans have been talking about, balancing the budget in a roundabout kind of way. They just don't say it anymore like they used to. It used to be the 5 great goals, we're going to balance the budget. That was a big one, right? Those little catchy phrases, right? Make America great again. They come in with these catchy little phrases. They get a certain part of the population all excited for it. And then they proceed to cut back on social service portfolios, which is, when you look at a federal government or even on a provincial government, you're looking at 1 or 2% of the total budget for the government within that, right? In terms of, you got 100% of a federal government, 1 to 2, maybe 3, we'll put it at 5% out of that 100% goes towards social programs, welfare, housing subsidies, yada, 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 right? But a lot of those subsidies now have been geared towards the immigrants because they're the ones that are the victims and need to be served first, because there's a darker agenda going on here. And for any person that wants to disconnect up to 42 million people from housing and food and water and electricity. Like, that is, I don't know what I was trying to say there, but that's extreme. Well, the states are like scrambling around trying to figure it out. But when you get into conspiracy theories, then you think of the National Guard, and it fits into the plan when it comes to Agenda 30, 2030, Agenda 2050, smart cities, universal incomes, right? Tracking people, bringing in credit scores. And the only way to fight back on that, in my opinion, is for a strong body of workers, whether public union workers or just union workers, because you need that network, okay? To start work on challenging the legislation under human right sections. And just don't drop the ball. And the more that can toe that line, I would think the better it is for the country. Because as it is right now, it doesn't look like it's very good. Considering we only got 2 days. And if they magically vote in to carry on with paying out these subsidies, these food, stamps, and allow people to live in their houses in the middle of winter with children versus trying to push out more into overcrowded shelters or under bridges. Well, the legislation would still have to be challenged, because as fast as they walk away from it, they'll come right back around and they'll just swing it at you again, and you'll be back in the same position. It'll just be a matter of time, right? Because our governments are lawless. That's why. Yeah. Like if I got cut off of welfare, like if I had food stamps, wouldn't bother me. No, because I'm okay. I can figure it out. It took a long time to get there, right? In terms of food prep and all that crap. But I wouldn't go hungry. That was the point, right? Because you never know. I mean, it could happen, right? New government will come in. The Unity Party will come in. Oh, well, I know you. You're Gordon Campbell's left hand and Christy Clark's right hand. One is left, one is right. It's still BC Liberal government, in my opinion, which is right in bed with who across on the other side, that is now putting 42 million people at risk. Out of 42 million, I got to leave it here because I'm going around in circles. At 42 million people at risk to either losing housing in the middle of winter, going into winter, which is a form of psychological warfare. That's what my experiences have taught me, right? It's designed to create fear, get that cortisol going, right? It's designed to make you angry and overreactive, and for some of us, it shuts us down. We start to self-medicate, which just speeds up the process to implode our houses or whatever it is. Our children become the targets, in terms of the predators in the community, and yada, the elderly go missing, and before you know it, you're fighting for grandma in court, trying to bring her back home, and they're saying no, we're keeping her $2,000 check because we're going to put her over here, and clearly you can't house her properly, even though she's been living with you for the last 35 years of her life. All of a sudden you're not good enough, right? That's the kind of shit that's going to happen on the next level, because it's been already happening. I mean, what are they like? okay, so they pass it. Let's just say after the 27th, everything magically remains the same. Nobody's getting kicked out of their houses through Section 8, right? For me, I wouldn't be cut off of Section 8. I'd just be like, gee, Mrs. Gill, I lost the income to pay rent, and now I'm back to where I was when John was medically kidnapped. Like, you got to cut me some slack here, at least for a couple of months until I can figure this out and, check out my freaking credit cards and how I'm going to wheel and deal with this and how I'm going to, because rent comes first, right? So, if you think about it, I'm still here. So clearly I did something right. Okay. But it was a sacrifice to it, and it put me $78,000 in debt. It wasn't just simply buying a couple of things like buckets to put food in with gamma lids. I mean, sure, that contributed toward my debt load, but it was the investment where if I did get cut off of welfare, well, I've got the food covered. And as for the rent, well, I could get us through for a couple of months anyway, based on what I've still got left on my credit cards. And, after that, well, I don't know what I would do, being that I'm blind as a bat. But that's the thing about government. It only takes one bad worker and a whole barrel of workers to ruin it for everybody. Yeah. Eleanor Gilding ruined it for everybody because she hasn't stopped doing what she did to her brother. She's just doing it to somebody else and educating more people how to do that, which is destroying more families, right? I'm just using her as an example. For these people in the States, even if they weren't cut off, you don't think within a year the subject's not going to come up again? That's what I'm trying to say. Because they always go for that 1, 2, 3, 4% at the bottom of the budget to say that if we get rid of this riff-raff human being, if we get rid of this riff-raff human being and that riff-raff family, then somehow it's magically going to balance an overbloated budget in terms of that other 95%, where a lot of that money within that budget on a government level, and I'm thinking about a provincial level at this point, which you can make it applicable to a state level, would be going into the public union sector workforce, even though they only represent a small portion of the general population. And my experience tells me if we got what was it? Oh, I don't even remember. We'll just say 4.6 million people in the province of British Columbia, Canada, back 15 years ago, and there was only 800,000 public sector union workers within the government as a provincial government, but they were taking up more than 50% of the budget based on their work payment, like their paychecks, their dental benefits, their healthcare benefits, their superannuation life insurance policies, their severance packages, their buyout pack, whatever, right? By the time their disability payments, by the time you go through the budget, the majority of that budget is going to their fees, however those fees are coming in. Well, it's the poorest of the poor at the bottom, within that 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5% that they attack to skim off the money to say that they're balancing the budget. Right now in the province, there's a few strikes going on, really. Canada Post, which is federal, is on strike, and now they're on rolling strikes. And then there's some sort of union within a sector of the government when it comes to social services that are on strike. And they're just operating at bare necessities, doing the bare minimum versus as a full workforce because they want a higher increase in wage increases and that, to keep up with inflation and their pension plans options. Paramedics are crying on that $22 an hour. I guess that's what some of them make. I don't think all of them make that. Maybe an entry level one, I don't know. But I come across these little videos where they're saying, oh, we're paramedics, frontline workers, yada, 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 $22 an hour, and I can't live. Support that union, da, 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 da. Otherwise, they're going to leave the province to go look for another job somewhere else. Right? All right. Even though the budget itself, for the most part, goes to those workers compared to the ones being illegally cut off of safety nets through corrupt legislation. You know how a hard disk can get corrupt? A flash drive can get corrupt? Well, that's what's happening with the government. It's corrupt. It's corrupt within the inside where the hard drive is. Right? So you either replace the hard drive. I don't think you can fix them. Maybe you can refurbish it, but to what degree or not, I don't know. Normally, you just replace them once they're corrupt. Unless you reformat them, depending on how corrupt it is. Right? Well, people need to fight back. And they're going to have to do it through a court of law, unfortunately, which is going to take years and years and years and years and years to do, assuming that anyone even wants to take the challenge. Because it would require lawyers, human rights lawyers. 42 million people losing their benefits becomes a plantation. That's a big plantation in terms of slaves being mistreated. Because they're already into servitude debt, right? You know what I'm saying? They're already in a form of slavery. Some of us just have more credit cards. And if you have assets, doesn't matter if it's a little teeny weeny trust fund, a house, a car, an RSP, retirement plan, they're going to take it away from you in order to meet their threshold before they will help you. But they have to sacrifice 42 million people to do that, to get you to where you got to be in order to be like them, if that makes sense. You may not have experienced it yet because too many before you have already experienced it, including myself. And because I've already experienced it more than once over a period of years, I can see what's going to happen to them before they even get there at the rate things are going. Because there's that gray area between the 42 million below that certain income level, where those that are at 40, so if there's 42 million, 380, we'll just say 40 million, 380. So there's 308. Okay. We already know what's happening to those below that poverty line. Okay. And we'll round it off at 40 million. And then we've got 340 million out of a total population of 380 million citizens in the United States, whether illegal or not, doesn't matter. 380 million people. So now we've got 340 million. And of course, there's only that 1% at the top that are the billionaires. And then, of course, we've got the ultra rich billionaires. And then, okay, so from 40 on up to 250 million. So for another 210 million people, if for them to think that they're not going to have something cut back on them somehow, some way. Oh my God, you stupid cat. Oh, what are you doing? Freaking Mickey. Puking up a freaking fur ball or something. That's what I was hearing. Okay, so you're looking at 210 million people that are next in line. Because it won't stop at 40 million in terms of putting everybody in check. Molding them into a corner where some will be plucked off here and some will be plucked off there and some will just completely disappear and some of them might escape, right? And once they're all under control, those other 210 million, well, they're next in line because they're the new poverty, the new poverty line. So we can say what's happening right now is an attack on the ultra impoverished person. Ultra, the finest of the fine. There's the ultra rich, or there's the ultra poor. So it's the ultra poor that are being attacked right now, while the poor from 40 million and up to 210 million, 250, I should say. That leaves you 210 million people that are next in line. Well, those above 250 up until 380 are all keeping up with the Joneses. So I don't know what the point of that video was all about other than to say I wanted to say it.